And then for the third month in a row, factory activity has declined. This is very, very serious.
This is serious because when you look at how much of a contribution manufacturing makes to the GDP, it's actually 14%, and that's a huge industry. And yes, for a third consecutive month in a row, factory activity in South Africa has slowed, according to Statistics South Africa. The latest data released show that manufacturing activity was down 2.3% in the month of May, from yet another decline in April and the previous month as well. The slowdown in activity should signal a major concern, although at a slower pace than in the previous month, thus reflecting a slight recovery from the negative impact of the floods in KwaZulu-Natal. For more on this and these developments, we are joined by Chifi Mhango, who is the Chief Economist at the Dawn Consulting Group. Chifi, thank you very much for joining us. Talk to us here about where production declines and growth being registered within this particular segment in the month of May.
Thank you very much for having us. And I think what we've really seen is more like a mixed bag of situation here in the whole, the segment within the manufacturing sector. We've seen largest decline in terms of production in the motor vehicle parts, close to almost 19% decline. Food and beverages, wood segment also showing a decline, basic iron and steel, as well as the furniture and other manufacturing products. Those are showing a decline in terms of the numbers with regard to production. But I think on the positive side, we've seen within there also the most consumer-oriented segments of the manufacturing sector, such as electrical machinery, radio, television and communication, clothing and textiles, showing some improvement in terms of production patterns. So that's where the mix is actually coming in from.
What are the key drivers to the latest trend that we are seeing in the past 3 months for the data that we have?
It's been obviously events in terms of what has been happening in KwaZulu-Natal with regard to the floods, obviously causing some disruptions in terms of trading patterns as well as also production patterns. But also what we've seen coming out very closely is actually consumer patterns. We've seen an improvement in terms of consumer patterns with regard to the electrical machinery products, for instance. So that is actually pushing up production in those segments of the economy. But also within those segments there's also been general improvement in terms of prices of finished goods as well as intermediary goods sold in those segments of the market, so which is actually also encouraging some production. But overall wise, I think the reason why we're having this negative trend in terms of production is because the key segments in terms of weighting, such as basic iron and steel, as well as motor vehicle and parts and accessories, are actually causing a major impact in terms of the declines into the overall figures.
But something interesting is happening of late. Production sales, they've continued to grow. Why is that? It seems out of kilter with the data that we have in terms of that manufacturing sector.
Well, sales is a combination of volume and price. So the reason why you're seeing that those are actually sales revenue, which means that from the price point of view, we're seeing a major improvement. And that is actually being depicted quite well if you look at the PPI data, where you're seeing the PPI data for final manufactured products is actually sitting there around the 14%, in fact 14.9.7%. If you're looking at the intermediate products, it's actually around 15%. So that is actually coming on very strong, whereby much as production is on the decline in terms of volume, but I think if you combine that with the production vis-a-vis the price, then you are seeing actually improvement in terms of sales volume, sales revenue. So that's where it's coming out.
The reason why we're talking about this afternoon is because it impacts on economic activity. It also impacts on how many jobs we can actually create. But a lot of questions have been asked about the challenges that continue to persist on the industrial landscape. From your viewpoint, what are the challenges that, besides the flooding in KZN, which is a historical matter now, what are the challenges that persist in the industrial landscape in South Africa?
Well, it's quite a number of them. I think we all know the ongoing situation around the energy supply from the electricity point of view with regard to what's happening at ESCOM supply. This load shedding are really causing a massive disruption in the production aspects, as well as into the areas where those segments of the manufacturing sector actually fits into the economy. So that's really causing some disruptions. But also the costs of doing business are quite high in terms of transport costs as well as the energy costs. That is actually hindering the industrialization of the South African economy in terms of progress going forward. But I think imports have also been a massive hindrance in terms of the patterns with regard to progress of the South African economy in terms of manufacturing. Imports into the clothing sector, imports into the steel industry are really causing also challenges into how the South African economy is actually moving going forward. So those are some of the other areas that we are actually seeing challenges. But also, we know when you are trying to invest into the economy, you look at the stability of the labor market. So within the manufacturing sector, we've seen a lot of strikes happening. Just recently, we saw something happening in the segment, such as the steel industry. So if you look at those elements, it's also discouraging investment into those segments of the economy.
The picture certainly does not look good for the second quarter GDP activity and the GDP data that we are going to get in the months to come. What are your projections of this sector on the next 6 months to December this year, as we are waiting for this particular sector to contribute even more to GDP growth in South Africa?
I think it's more around addressing the challenges that we're facing in the sector. The challenge that I mentioned earlier on around the electricity aspects, that obviously will lead us to the point where we can actually have a much improved growth patterns going forward. But currently, with the existing situation which we are facing now, I think these negative numbers will persist as long as the conditions of the challenges in the sector also persist. So that's what we're seeing out. So in essence, I think if you look at it from the number point of view, I'm not seeing a growth of more than 2% in the sector, in the production pattern going forward. But I think on the sales side, we will continue to see improvement in the sales activities within the manufacturing sector.
Chifi Mhango is the Chief Economist at the Dawn Consulting Group. Thank you very much for your time.